What happens when a perfect life shatters? For Amelia Thorne, it wasn't just the betrayal, it was the humiliation. In a place of law, a brutal act of violence was committed. Not by a stranger, but by her husband's mistress. But the slap that echoed in that courthouse hallway wasn't the real explosion. The real bomb was the one person sitting on the bench, gavel in hand, who had the power to destroy them all. And he was the one person the mistress never thought she'd have to face in public: her father. The lie of Amelia Thorne's life was spelled out in 18-karat gold. It was in the Cartier bangles that clinked softly on her wrist, a sound that had once felt like music and now felt like the rattling of chains. It was in the floor-to-ceiling windows of their glass and steel penthouse, a marvel of modern architecture in downtown Austin that offered panoramic views of a city she no longer felt a part of. The apartment was cold. Not in temperature, Julian insisted on a constant 72 degrees, but in spirit. It was a museum of their success, curated by a high-priced designer named Antoine, who believed comfort was a form of artistic compromise. There were no family photos, just abstract, expressionist art, a massive, swirling canvas of angry blues and reds that Julian had paid 6 figures for at a Sotheby's auction. Amelia often stared at it, feeling it was the only honest thing in the room. Julian Thorne. The name was a headline. Julian Thorne, Tech's golden boy, secures 2 bars in Series D funding. Julian Thorne of Thorne Applied Dynamics, TIAD, on the future of AI. Julian and Amelia Thorne dazzle at the Met. He was brilliant, devastatingly handsome, and utterly empty. Amelia, now 6 months pregnant, was supposed to be the final piece of his collection. The beautiful, pedigreed wife, a graduate of Wellesley with a lineage tracing back to the Mayflower, and now the mother of his heir. She had been the perfect partner, smiling at galas, hosting charity dinners, and quietly shelving her own ambitions in art history to support his. The cracks had been hairline fractures for years, the late nights he blamed on server-side emergencies. The business trips to Tokyo and Berlin, he insisted she was too tired to join, the way his eyes, once warm and adoring, now skated over her, tallying her up like an asset. But the fracture split wide open 3 weeks ago, not with a bang, but with the subtle, insidious scent of Baccarat Rouge 540. It was a perfume Amelia knew well. Every aspiring socialite in Austin wore it. It was loud, sugary, and desperate. It was not her scent. She wore a subtle, vintage Guerlain. She found it clinging to his tuxedo when he came home at 4 a.m. from a networking dinner. Then she saw the texts. He had been careless, leaving his secondary work phone on the marble countertop of his bathroom. Amelia had never touched it, but the perfume had made her bold. The name was Serafina, not Sarah or Jane. Serafina. It was a name that sounded like it was chosen, not given. The texts were not just flirtatious. They were a detailed, graphic novel of their affair. They were snapshots of his hands on her body, of her in his hotel rooms. There was one that made Amelia's blood turn to ice. Serafina. Can't wait to see the look on her face when you tell her. She must be getting fat by now. Julian, soon. Just locking down the new round of funding. Keep your father on the line. His advice has been invaluable. Serafina. He's an old dinosaur, but he'll be useful. Now tell me again about the Cayman accounts. Amelia didn't just see infidelity. She saw a conspiracy. His request for a post-nuptial agreement last month, which he'd disguised as a standard liability protection for the new funding round, suddenly felt sinister. She photographed every text, every bank statement she could find. She downloaded the data from the phone and wiped it. She went to her OB/GYN for a checkup, her hands shaking so badly the nurse asked if she was cold. "Just nerves," Amelia had whispered, clutching the small, swelling dome of her stomach. This baby, her baby, was the only real thing left. She didn't confront him. Not then. A screaming match was what Serafina would have done. Amelia was a thorn, and her exit would be as curated and precise as the life she was leaving. She contacted Elena Vance. Vance wasn't a family law attorney. She was a corporate litigator, a shark in bespoke tailored suits who had famously dissolved a media empire and handed the pieces to the wronged wife. Her motto, whispered in legal circles, was, "Don't get mad, get everything." The meeting was in a discreet office in a high-rise far from Julian's. Eleanor, a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair pulled into a severe bun, reviewed the data. "This is not a divorce, Mrs. Thorne," Eleanor said, her voice a calm, low hum. "This is a corporate extraction. The infidelity is just a symptom. The disease is the fraud." "Fraud? He's moving assets. These Cayman accounts. He's hiding his stake in TAD from the investors, and, by extension, from you. This Serafina, she's not just a mistress. She's a co-conspirator." The word hit Amelia harder than mistress. "He's using her," Elena continued. "He's using her father for advice. We need to know who her father is. It could be key. Julian is trying to build a new financial fortress, and he plans to lock you and your child out of it." Amelia's nausea wasn't morning sickness, it was rage, a cold, quiet, calculating rage that finally, after years of dormancy, felt good. "What do we do?" Amelia asked. "We file," Eleanor said, a thin, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "We file and we freeze his assets. We don't just file for divorce. We file for a temporary injunction and a full forensic audit of Thorne-applied dynamics. We go for the jugular." "He'll fight," Amelia said. "Let him," Eleanor replied, tapping the phone with the texts. "He's already given us the bullets. Now we just wait for him to hand us the gun." The filing hit Julian like a truck. He was served not at home, but in the middle of a board meeting. A quiet, unassuming process server walked into the glass-walled conference room and placed the thick packet of documents on the table in front of him, right next to his $1.8 million Patek Philippe watch. His composure, the famous Thorne cool, shattered. He had swept into the penthouse that evening, his face a mask of thunder. "How dare you?" he hissed, ripping off his tie. "How dare I?" Amelia was calm. She was standing by the window, her hands cradling her belly. "You've endangered the company. A full audit. An injunction. This is our money, Amelia. You've gone insane. The pregnancy is making you crazy." "She has a name, Julian," Amelia said, her voice dangerously quiet. "What?" "The pregnancy. She is a girl. And our money? You mean the money you've been hiding in the Cayman Islands with the help of your mistress?" The color drained from his face. His mask of rage was replaced by a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. He hadn't thought she knew. He had underestimated her. You bitch," he stammered. "That's one word for it," Amelia said. "Eleanor Vance has another. She calls it due diligence. You're a cheat, Julian, but I didn't realize you were also a common thief." He lunged then, not to hit her, but to grab her, his fingers digging into her arms. "You will stop this. You will call off your lawyer. You don't know what you're doing." "Get your hands off me," Amelia said, staring him dead in the eye. He saw something in her gaze that wasn't there before. The pliant, supportive wife was gone. In her place was a woman made of polished steel. He recoiled. "You'll regret this, Amelia," he spat. "You will end up with nothing." I will see to it. The first hearing is in 3 weeks, Amelia said, turning back to the view. See you in court, Julian. The 3 weeks leading up to the hearing were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Julian, having retained the most ruthless divorce attorney in Texas, Richard Rich Blackwood, immediately went on the offensive. Blackwood was the anti-Eleanor Vance. Where she was precise and cold, he was loud and bombastic. He filed motion after motion, painting Amelia as an unstable and emotionally volatile spouse, driven by hormonal fantasies to destroy her husband's life's work. He demanded a psychological evaluation of Amelia. He contested the paternity of the child. He's contesting paternity? Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. She was sitting in Eleanor's office, the legal documents blurring through her tears. It's a standard tactic, Eleanor said, her voice devoid of emotion. It's designed to break you, to make you settle for pennies on the dollar just to make the humiliation stop. He's not accusing you of infidelity, my dear. He's accusing you of being too weak to fight back. Don't fall for it. Amelia straightened, wiping her eyes. What's our move? We ignore the noise. We focus on the facts, the money trail. I've got a forensic accountant, a man named Peter Holloway, who used to work for the SEC. He's a bloodhound. He's already found discrepancies in TD's quarterly reports. Julian has been using a series of shell corporations, all registered in Delaware, to buy consulting services from an offshore entity. That's how he's siphoning the money. Serafina, Amelia whispered. Exactly. But she's just the face of the account. The real question is, who is her father? The man Julian wanted to keep on the line. The man whose advice was so invaluable. That's the piece we're missing. Amelia's life became a fortress. She moved out of the penthouse, on Eleanor's advice, and into a secure, high-end rental under a false name. The stress was high, and her doctor ordered partial bed rest. The isolation was a new kind of prison. But this time the walls felt protective. Julian, meanwhile, was unraveling. The injunction, while not fully freezing his assets, had put a temporary hold on the Cayman accounts. His investors were asking questions. His golden boy image was tarnishing. He was bleeding money to Blackwood, and he was furious. And he was still seeing Serafina. Amelia knew this because she had, on Eleanor's advice, hired a private investigator. Not to prove the infidelity, they already had that, but to identify the father. The PI, a grizzled ex-cop named Costello, was good. He tracked Serafina Reed, her full name, from her luxury condo, paid for by Julian, to a series of high-end restaurants. She was young, barely 25, with the manufactured beauty of an Instagram model. She was also, Costello noted, incredibly reckless. She likes to talk, Costello reported, sliding a folder across the table to Amelia and Eleanor. Brags to her friends, says she's got Julian wrapped around her little finger. Says as soon as the crazy pregnant wife is gone, she'll be the new Mrs. Thorne. Childish, Eleanor murmured, scanning the report. Did you find the father? This is where it gets weird, Costello said, tapping a photo. She meets him. Once a week. Same place. An old-school steakhouse. Del Frisco's. But he doesn't sit with her. He sits at the bar. She sits in a booth. They never speak. He watches her. She eats her steak. And then she leaves. After she's gone, he pays her check and his own, and leaves. That's bizarre, Amelia said. It's a control tactic, Eleanor said. Or a penance. Who is he? Costello slid another 8x10 photo across the table. It was a man in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a dark, severe suit. He had a face that looked carved from granite, with a shock of thick silver hair and eyes that seemed to burn a hole through the camera lens. Holy, Amelia breathed. Eleanor Vance, for the first time since Amelia had met her, looked genuinely surprised. She picked up the photo, her hand almost trembling. "Do you know him?" Amelia asked. "Oh, I know him," Eleanor said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "Everyone in Texas law knows him. That's Judge Marcus Donovan. He sits on the bench of the 350th District Court." "A judge?" Amelia was confused. "Julian is using a judge for advice on everything," Eleanor said, her mind clearly racing, connecting 1,000 invisible dots. Zoning laws, tax loopholes, corporate structuring. Marcus Donovan. He's old money. Austin. His family practically wrote the state charter. He's famous for two things: his unassailable integrity in public and his ruthless, cold-blooded demeanor in private. He's untouchable. But Serafina? His daughter, Eleanor said. His only child. His wife died in childbirth. The story goes, he's never forgiven Serafina for it. He's kept her at arm's length her entire life, sent her to boarding schools, paid her bills, but never gave her the time of day. Suddenly, Serafina's desperate, clinging to Julian, her daddy complex, her reckless behavior, it all made a terrible, tragic sense. She wasn't a partner. She was a lonely girl, starstruck by a man who gave her attention, who was, in his own twisted way, using her to get to the one man who wouldn't. "My God," Amelia said. Julian wasn't using the judge's advice. He was using Serafina to try and get to the judge. To get, what, approval? Influence? "A seat at the big table," Eleanor said. "Julian is new money. Donovan is old. Julian wants to be him. But now, we have the gun." "What do you mean?" "The hearing, our injunction. Guess who was just assigned to our case? The system randomly assigns them. But with a case this high profile, they give it to a senior judge." Amelia's blood ran cold. "No." "Yes," Eleanor said, her smile returning, sharp as a scalpel. "We are set to appear in the 355th District Court. Our presiding judge is Marcus Donovan." "But he's Serafina's father. He has to recuse himself." "Does he?" Eleanor mused. "His name isn't on a single document. Serafina's isn't either, not officially. On paper, this is a simple, if messy, divorce. He's not required to recuse himself unless a conflict is formally presented. And Serafina, she is his estranged, unacknowledged dirty laundry. He would never claim her in public." "So what does Julian know?" "He knows his mistress's father is a judge. He's probably been bragging to her about it, telling her he'll have Daddy on his side. He has no idea that Daddy is the very man who will be deciding his financial fate. He thinks he's got a secret weapon. He's about to walk into an ambush." This is a nightmare," Amelia whispered. "No, my dear," Eleanor said, closing the file. "This is leverage. The only question is, who gets blown up when the bomb goes off? Let's go to court." The 355th District Court was a monolith of beige marble and quiet intimidation. The air itself felt heavy, smelling of old wood polish, stale coffee, and low-grade anxiety. Amelia, dressed in a simple, elegant navy maternity dress, Eleanor's choice, sympathetic but not weak, walked as if through water. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Julian was already there, at the plaintiff's table, with Richard Blackwood. Julian looked impeccable in a $10,000 Tom Ford suit, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. He looked, for all the world, like a man who owned the room. He didn't even glance at Amelia as she and Elena took their seats. "He's confident," Amelia whispered to Elena. "He's an arrogant fool," Elena whispered back. "He's about to argue with a man who could buy and sell him 10 times over, and he thinks he's the one with the power. Watch this. All rise. The courtroom doors at the back of the bench opened, and Judge Marcus Donovan entered. He was more imposing in person than in the PI's photo. He moved with a slow, deliberate gravity, his black robes billowing. He didn't just take the bench, he ascended to it. He sat, and the entire room, a packed gallery of lawyers and observers, seemed to be sucked into his orbit. His eyes, a pale, icy blue, scanned the room. They rested for a fraction of a second on Julian, then on Amelia, then on Eleanor. When his eyes met Eleanor's, there was a tiny, almost imperceptible narrowing, a flicker of recognition? Respect? In the matter of Thorn versus Thorn, his voice boomed, a rich, resonant baritone that required no microphone. Counsel, approach. Eleanor and Blackwood went to the bench. Amelia watched Julian. He was preening, adjusting his cuffs, looking at the judge with an almost admiring gaze. He had no idea. The preliminary arguments were dry, a flurry of legal jargon. Blackwood was loud, gesturing wildly. My client, Mr. Thorn, is the victim of a vindictive gold-digging... Mr. Blackwood, the judge's voice cut through the air like a guillotine. You will lower your voice. You are in a court of law, not a rodeo. Stick to the merits of the motion. Ms. Vance, your response? Eleanor was a surgeon. Your Honor, the vindictiveness Mr. Blackwood refers to is a standard request for a forensic audit, based on clear and present evidence of asset concealment, as detailed in Exhibit 4A. We are not here to debate the state of the marriage. We are here to equitably dissolve it. And to do that, we must first know what there is to divide. The judge listened, his face a mask. I have read your motion for injunction, Ms. Vance, and your counter-motion to strike, Mr. Blackwood. The allegations of fiscal impropriety are significant. I am inclined to grant. Your Honor, Blackwood interrupted, a fatal mistake. Judge Donovan's eyes turned to him. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of utter, dismissive cold. Mr. Blackwood, if you interrupt me again, I will have the bailiff escort you to the holding cell to reflect on your courtroom etiquette. Am I clear? Blackwood turned a shade of puce. Yes, Your Honor. I will be taking a 15-minute recess to review these exhibits more closely, the judge said, his eyes on the Cayman account numbers. And when we return, I will hear arguments on only the temporary injunction. The rest of your theatrical filings, Mr. Blackwood, are dismissed. He banged the gavel. Recess. The tension broke. Julian stood, hissing at Blackwood. What the hell was that? You said you had this. He's biased, Blackwood mumbled, stuffing papers into his briefcase. He's clearly biased against... Amelia and Eleanor stood to leave for the hallway. As Amelia turned, she saw her. Standing at the back of the courtroom, having just slipped in, was Seraphina Reed. She was not dressed for court. She was dressed for a nightclub. A red, skin-tight bandage dress, 6-inch Louboutin heels, and a cloud of Baccarat Rouge 540 that preceded her. She looked cheap, hard, and utterly furious. Her eyes were locked on Julian. Amelia, don't look, Eleanor said, guiding her by the elbow. She's not allowed in here. She's not a party to this. She's looking at Julian, Amelia breathed. She's angry with him. Good. Let them eat each other. Let's go. You need some water. They stepped into the beige hallway. It was less crowded now. Amelia leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath, her hand on her belly. He's going to lose, isn't he? The judge. He sees right through them. Donovan is many things, Eleanor said. But he is not stupid. He detests new money show-offs like Thorn, and he especially detests sloppy legal work like Blackwood's. Now stay here. I'm going to get you that water." Amelia closed her eyes for just a second. The relief was so profound, she almost felt lightheaded. "So, you're the one." The voice was sharp, nasal. Amelia's eyes snapped open. Serafina Reed was standing 2 feet away from her. She was vibrating with a toxic, manic energy. "Excuse me?" Amelia said, instinctively taking a step back, her back hitting the wall. "You're the pregnant wife," Serafina sneered, air quoting the words. "Wow, he really did a number on you. You look tired." "Please, I don't want any trouble," Amelia said, looking around for Eleanor. The hallway was momentarily empty. "Oh, you don't want trouble?" Serafina laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Honey, you're a little late. You filed a piece of paper that just cost Julian his company, and you cost me everything." "What I did to protect my child," Amelia said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Your child." Serafina's eyes, wide and dilated, dropped to Amelia's stomach. A look of pure, primal disgust crossed her face. "You think that thing is going to save you? You think he's going to pay for that?" "Julian told me. He's not even sure it's his." The lie. The one Blackwood had put in the filing. To hear it from her mouth. It was a violation. "You are a delusional, cruel girl," Amelia said, pushing off the wall. "You're a pawn in a game he's playing. He's using you, just like he used me." "He loves me," Serafina shrieked, her voice cracking. He's just stressed, and you did this." "He's lying to you, Serafina. He's lying to everyone, including your—" Amelia stopped. "My what?" Serafina's eyes narrowed. "My what?" Amelia saw the opening. The one card she could play. "Your father." Serafina froze. The smug, angry mask dissolved, replaced by the same flicker of panic Amelia had seen on Julian's face. "What? What do you know about my father?" "I know he's Judge Marcus Donovan," Amelia said, her voice low. "And I know Julian has been trying to use you to get to him. He's not in love with you. He's in love with your father's power." Serafina's face went from pale to a deep, mottled red. You bitch." "It's the truth," Amelia said, trying to step past her. "You don't get to say his name." Serafina lunged, shoving Amelia. Amelia stumbled, her hand flying out to catch the wall. "Stop, I'm pregnant." "You think I care?" Serafina's face was contorted. This wasn't about Julian. This was about her father, about the secret and the shame. Amelia had named it. Serafina drew back her hand, nails first, aiming for Amelia's face. Amelia turned, but she wasn't fast enough. Slap! The sound was like a gunshot in the marble hallway. It wasn't a glancing blow. It was a full-force, open-palmed assault. Serafina's acrylic nail caught the edge of Amelia's eye, while her palm connected with her cheek. The force sent Amelia spinning. She hit the wall hard, shoulder first, and slid down, a cry of pain and shock escaping her. She automatically curled into a ball, her arms wrapping around her stomach, her cheek blazing as if on fire. "Oh my God." The voice was Julian's. Amelia looked up through her tears. Julian was standing at the end of the hall, next to Blackwood. His face was ashen. He had seen the whole thing. Serafina was frozen, her hand still tingling, her eyes wide with a horrible, dawning realization of what she had just done. In a courthouse, to a pregnant woman, in front of witnesses. "Amelia!" Eleanor Vance's voice. She was running, dropping the water bottles, her face a mask of cold fury. She knelt by Amelia. "Are you hurt? The baby?" I think I'm okay," Amelia sobbed, the adrenaline and shock making her tremble. Eleanor's eyes lifted. They didn't go to Julian. They went to Serafina, who was backing away. "Bailiff!" Eleanor's voice didn't just rise, it commanded. "Bailiff! We have an assault!" A large man in a uniform appeared from the courtroom. "What's going on here?" "This woman," Eleanor said, pointing a steady, damning finger at Serafina, "has just physically assaulted my client, Mrs. Thorne, a pregnant woman, in this courthouse. I want her arrested." The hallway, once empty, was now a vortex of chaos. The bailiff was blocking Serafina's exit, his hand on his sidearm. Julian was frozen, trapped between his mistress and his wife, a pathetic statue of indecision. Richard Blackwood looked like he was going to be physically ill. I didn't," Serafina stammered, looking at Julian. "Julian, tell them. She provoked me." "She provoked you?" Eleanor Vance stood up, her 5'4" frame radiating the energy of a nuclear reactor. "My client is 6 months pregnant, and you struck her. You're lucky you're not being charged with attempted murder." "Ma'am," the bailiff said to Serafina, his voice tired, "you need to come with me." "Now? No, Julian!" Serafina shrieked as the bailiff took her arm, and just then the courtroom door opened. Judge Marcus Donovan stepped out, his face a thundercloud. "What is the meaning of this? This is my courtroom, not a fish market." The hallway went silent. The bailiff, Serafina, Julian, Blackwood, Eleanor, and Amelia, crouched on the floor, all froze. Judge Donovan's icy eyes took in the scene. He saw Eleanor Vance, bristling with rage. He saw Julian Thorne, pale and sweating. He saw Amelia on the floor, a bright red handprint blooming on her cheek, and then his gaze landed on the bailiff and the woman he was holding, his daughter. Serafina's face, which had been a mask of rage and panic, simply collapsed. All the fight went out of her. She looked for the first time like a small, terrified child. "Dad." The word was a tiny, broken whisper. But in the cathedral-like silence of the hallway, it was a nuclear explosion. Julian Thorne's head snapped from Serafina to the judge. His eyes went wide. His jaw dropped. The math, the impossible math, was happening in his head. Serafina. Judge. Dad. This wasn't an ally. This wasn't an in. This was the man he'd been trying to impress, the man whose advice he'd been bragging about. And he was the judge in his divorce, the judge who had just witnessed the immediate aftermath of his mistress assaulting his pregnant wife. Julian Thorne, the golden boy, the man who always had a plan, looked like he was about to faint. Judge Marcus Donovan's expression didn't change, not by a single twitch of a muscle. He did not look at Serafina. He did not acknowledge her. His gaze remained fixed on the scene, processing, calculating. He looked at the bailiff. "What has she done?" "This lady," the bailiff said, gesturing to Eleanor, "says this one," gesturing to Serafina, "assaulted this one," gesturing to Amelia. Judge Donovan's eyes moved to Amelia. He looked at the red mark on her face. He looked at her pregnant stomach, which she was still clutching. "I see," he said. His voice was perfectly level. He looked at Eleanor Vance. "Is your client able to continue?" Eleanor, momentarily stunned by the revelation, recovered instantly. "No, Your Honor. My client has been the victim of a violent crime. She needs to be examined by a medical professional immediately. This person," she spat the word at Serafina, "needs to be held accountable." "Agreed," the judge said. He turned to the bailiff. "Take Ms. Reed to the holding cell. Charge her with assault. Set her bail at the maximum. I want her processed, now." "Dad, no, please!" Serafina finally broke. She started to sob, pulling against the bailiff. "I didn't mean to. He made me. Julian," Tell him." Julian cringed, taking a step away from her, as if her words were radioactive. Judge Donovan gave his daughter his full attention for the first time. His face was not angry. It was not sad. It was nothing. It was a void. "You have embarrassed yourself, Serafina," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the silence. "But more, you have embarrassed this court. You will be processed like any other common criminal. I am done." He turned his back on her. As the bailiff dragged her, weeping and shrieking, down the hall, the judge looked at the remaining parties. "Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Thorne, Miss Vance, in my chambers. 5 minutes." He turned, his robe sweeping the floor, and disappeared back into the courtroom. Julian leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. "Blackwood," he wheezed. "Blackwood, what do we do?" "Shut up, Julian," Blackwood whispered, his own face grey. "Just shut up." Eleanor helped Amelia to her feet. "Are you all right?" He's her father," Amelia whispered, her mind reeling. "He's the father." "Yes," Eleanor said, a look of terrible, brilliant clarity on her face. "And he just had to watch his train wreck of a daughter get arrested for assaulting his new money son-in-law's pregnant wife. He's furious. But not at you. He's furious at them, for bringing their trash into his house. What's going to happen? He's going to recuse himself. He has to now." "So, we lose him?" Amelia asked, confused. "Oh no, my dear," Eleanor said, smoothing Amelia's hair, her eyes glittering like steel traps. "We don't lose him. We've just won. He can't be our judge. But he's just been made the most powerful witness in this case. He now has a personal stake in seeing Julian Thorne burn. This isn't a divorce anymore. This is a blood feud." The judge's chambers were as cold and imposing as the man himself. Thick, dark mahogany books lined the walls, not for reading, but for effect. A massive, ornate desk separated him from the two legal teams. He wasn't sitting. He was standing by the window, looking out over the city. Julian and Blackwood looked like they were walking to their own execution. Amelia, bolstered by Eleanor, sat with a quiet, shocked dignity, a paramedic-provided ice pack held to her cheek. "I will be brief," Judge Donovan said, not turning around. "I am, as of this moment, recusing myself from the case of Thorne versus Thorne. The events of the last 20 minutes have made my continued involvement untenable." "Your Honor, if I may," Blackwood squeaked. "You may not, Mr. Blackwood," Donovan said, finally turning. His eyes pinned Blackwood to the spot. "You may not speak at all. You have brought a circus into my court. Your client, Mr. Thorne," he spat the name like it was poison, "has shown a catastrophic lack of judgment, bringing his associates," the word was loaded with contempt, "into a place of law." He looked at Julian. "You, sir, you come into my city. You build your glass and steel monstrosities. You court our investors. And you think you have no responsibility. You think you can conduct your sordid affairs and bring your filth into the public domain. You were aware, I presume, of my relationship with Miss Reed." Julian's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Blackwood. "Answer him, Julian," Blackwood muttered. I knew she was your daughter, Your Honor. But I had no idea you'd be the judge?" Donovan's voice was a soft, dangerous hiss. "You thought you could get, what? Favorable treatment? You thought you could use my daughter as a conduit to me." The judge saw it. He saw the whole pathetic scheme. "You are a fool, Mr. Thorne. You are a weak, morally bankrupt and idiotic fool. You have not only destroyed your marriage, you have now, very publicly, tied your financial wagon to a Class C assault charge." He turned to Eleanor. "Miss Vance, my recusal is immediate. A new judge will be assigned by the end of the day. I trust you will ensure your client receives the medical and legal protection she requires." "I will, Your Honor," Eleanor said, her voice neutral. "Good. Now get out. All of you. Get out of my chambers." The explosion was immediate. By the time Amelia was being checked out at the hospital, she and the baby were fine, just shaken. The story was already leaking. Not to the mainstream press, but to the more insidious legal and society blogs. Chaos at 350th. Judge's daughter arrested for attacking pregnant wife of tech mogul. Richard Blackwood was the first casualty. Julian fired him in the courthouse parking garage, a screaming match that was recorded by a legal aid. "You were supposed to control this," Julian had yelled. "You let this happen." "I let this happen?" Blackwood had screamed back. "Your mistress slapped your wife in front of her father, the judge. There is no legal precedent for that level of stupid, Julian. You're toxic. We're done." Julian Thorne was in free fall. He holed up in his penthouse, the drapes drawn. His board of directors at Thorne Applied Dynamics called an emergency meeting. The assault story was one thing. The fiscal impropriety in the court filing was another. The injunction, even if temporary, had spooked their investors at Goldman Sachs and BlackRock. Julian was no longer a golden boy. He was a liability. He tried to call Serafina. Her phone went straight to voicemail. She was in a holding cell, her one phone call used on a bail bondsman. Her father had, of course, refused to take the call. Serafina's meeting with her father, 2 days later, was not the emotional reunion of a prodigal daughter. Judge Donovan had her brought to his study at his ancestral home. She was out on bail, looking pale and small in a borrowed sweatshirt. "Do you have any idea," he said, not looking at her, "what you have done?" I'm sorry," she whispered. She said. "I don't care what she said," he snapped. "I don't care about your pathetic, childish drama. I'm talking about me. I have spent 40 years building a reputation of perfect, cold, unassailable integrity. In one idiotic, classless display, you have tied me to him. To Julian? To that child, that new money parasite. You have put my name, the Donovan name, in the same sentence as mistress, assault, and divorce court. I am being investigated by the Judicial Commission. They have to for appearances. I have had to recuse myself. You have made me look involved. You have made me look biased. I love him, Dad," she cried. "And he said he just wanted to impress you. He said you were the kind of man he wanted to be. He admires you." Judge Donovan finally looked at her. His face was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. "He admires my power, you foolish girl, and he was using you to try and steal it. And you were so desperate for a father, you mistook a predator for a partner." He walked to his desk. "Your allowance is cut off. The condo, which I pay for, will be sold. The car is being repossessed. You are 25 years old. It is time you grew up." "What?" she sobbed. "You can't. Where will I go?" "I'm told the real world can be an excellent teacher. Your assault trial is in 6 weeks. I suggest you find a public defender. And a job. Now get out of my house." Serafina Reed, for the first time in her life, was utterly, completely alone. For Amelia, the world had become blessedly quiet. She was ensconced in her new, secure condo. Eleanor Vance had handled everything. The new judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Alani Williams, had immediately granted the forensic audit. Peter Holloway, the bloodhound accountant, was now legally unleashed upon Thorne Applied Dynamics. "He's panicking," Eleanor said, visiting Amelia. "Julian, he's trying to move the money, but we've got the Cayman accounts locked. He's trapped. He sent a settlement offer." She slid a paper across the table. It was a huge number. 50 million. He wants this to go away, Amelia said. He wants to buy my silence. He wants to stop Peter Holloway from digging, Eleanor corrected. This isn't go-away money. This is stop the criminal investigation money, which brings me to Peter. He found something? He's found everything, Eleanor said, her eyes alight. Julian wasn't just hiding money from you, Amelia. He was hiding it from the IRS, from his investors. He was using a complex double Dutch-Irish sandwich scheme to wash profits through shell companies. But the texts, he mentioned Serafina's father, Judge Donovan's advice. Exactly, Eleanor said. Julian's fraud is sloppy, amateur. But the advice he was getting, the specific archaic tax loopholes, the zoning variances for Tad's new campus, that was not amateur. That was sophisticated. Old school. Donovan, Amelia breathed. Julian was using Serafina to get access, but he was already getting advice. He just wanted to get closer. The question is, who was the original source of that advice, if not Donovan himself? What do you mean? Donovan would never put anything in writing, not for a fool like Thorne. But Holloway found something, a name, a consultant on Teddy's books, a $500,000 retainer paid out over the last 2 years, a man who does have Donovan's ear. Eleanor slid a second piece of paper over. A man named Richard Blackwood. Amelia's head spun. Julian's lawyer. But not just his lawyer, Eleanor said. His fixer. Blackwood and Judge Donovan. They came up together. They were partners at the same firm 30 years ago, before Donovan took the bench. They loathe each other, but they're bound together. Blackwood knows all of Donovan's secrets, and he's been selling them. So, Julian hired Blackwood because Blackwood was the conduit to Donovan's world. Julian wasn't just cheating on you, Amelia. He was part of a massive, systemic ring of old boy corruption. The affair with Serafina, that was just a symptom of his pathological desire to join their club. This is so much bigger than I thought. It's huge, Eleanor said. And the slap. The slap was the butterfly wing that started the hurricane. It exposed Serafina, which exposed the judge, which forced the recusal, which got Julian's original lawyer, Blackwood, fired. And now, Blackwood is angry, and he's talking. He's talking. To who? Eleanor Vance smiled. To me. He called me this morning. He's willing to trade Julian Thorne to save his own skin. Richard Rich Blackwood was a man reduced. When he met Eleanor Vance at a neutral third-rate hotel bar, he was no longer the bombastic courtroom brawler. He was a man who had seen the abyss, and the abyss had stared back, and it had Judge Donovan's face. He's going to destroy me, Blackwood said, nursing a scotch. Donovan, he knows I was feeding Thorne advice. He tolerated it, as long as I was useful. But now, Thorne is toxic. Serafina is a pariah, and I'm the loose end. So you're willing to testify, Eleanor said, her water untouched. In exchange for what? Immunity. I bring you Julian Thorne on a platter. Fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, and I bring you the real dirt, the thing Thorne doesn't even know he was part of. I'm listening, Eleanor said. Thorne applied dynamics. Blackwood leaned in, his voice a hoarse whisper. The zoning for the new campus, the land was unbuildable. It was a protected watershed. But Julian got the permits, he got the variances, and the land value jumped 800% overnight. His investors were thrilled. How? Donovan. He didn't sign it himself. He's too smart for that. He had a junior judge, a protégé, sign the order. But the legal argument for it, that was his. I wrote the motion. He advised. Julian just paid the bill. So Julian Donovan and you, conspired to defraud the city, the investors and the EPA, Eleanor summarized, her pulse quickening. Julian thought he was just greasing the wheels, Blackwood sneered. He's a tech bro. He has no idea how real power works. He was just the money man, the useful idiot. But he's the one whose name is on the fraudulent EPA filings. He's the one who signed the checks to my consulting firm. And you have proof, Eleanor stated. I have everything, Blackwood said. Memos, emails, wire transfer confirmations. I am a very good lawyer, Ms. Vance, which means I am a very thorough note keeper. This isn't a divorce case, Eleanor said, realizing the scope. It stopped being a divorce case the moment that girl's hand hit your client's face, Blackwood said. This is a federal case. This is RICO. Eleanor Vance's mind, a finely tuned legal instrument, was humming. This was the ball game. Amelia wasn't just a wronged wife. She was the key witness, the victim who had inadvertently blown the whistle on a multi-million-dollar corruption ring. Amelia's deposition was no longer about infidelity. It was with two stone-faced men from the U.S. Attorney's office. She sat, now 8 months pregnant, and calmly, clearly laid out the timeline. The discovery of the texts, the Cayman accounts, the name Serafina, the reference to her father's advice. The slap was the event that tied it all together. It was the moment the conspiracy became public. The U.S. Attorney was very interested. The second hearing in Thorne versus Thorne was a different beast. The gallery was packed, not with society gossips, but with serious, grim-faced journalists from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Judge Alani Williams presided. Julian Thorne was there, with a new, less effective lawyer. He looked smaller. The Tom Ford suit was rumpled. He had lost weight. Amelia was there, radiant and calm. We are here to review the findings of the forensic accountant, Judge Williams began. Your Honor, a new voice cut in. A man in a dark suit stood at the back. Paul Costigan, U.S. Attorney's Office. I am afraid I must interrupt these proceedings. We are here to serve a warrant. The courtroom doors opened, and 2 FBI agents walked in. Julian Thorne's head snapped up. His face, already pale, turned the color of ash. Julian Thorne, Agent 1 said, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and tax evasion. Julian stood up, knocking his chair over. What? No, this is her, he shrieked, pointing at Amelia. She did this. It's a lie. Mr. Thorne, the agent said, please put your hands behind your back. As they cuffed him, his eyes, wild and terrified, found Amelia's. This wasn't the cold, calculating man from the penthouse. This was a cornered, terrified boy. He had built a house of cards on corrupt foundations, and he was shocked that a simple, honest wind had blown it all down. But the agents weren't done. Your Honor, the U.S. Attorney said to a stunned Judge Williams, we also have a warrant for a material witness, Ms. Serafina Reed, for questioning in this conspiracy, and a warrant to search the chambers and home of Judge Marcus Donovan. The courtroom exploded. The golden boy was led out in handcuffs. The mistress was about to be arrested again. And the judge, the untouchable, granite-faced patriarch, was about to have his world torn apart. Amelia sat, one hand on her belly, and watched the man who had betrayed her be led away. She felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just empty. Eleanor Vance put a hand on her arm. It's over, Amelia, she whispered. It's finally over. The trials, plural, were the story of the decade in Texas. It was a domino effect of karma. Richard Blackwood. He was the star witness. In exchange for his testimony, he received a reduced sentence, 2 years in a low-security facility, and permanent disbarment. He died 5 years later, managing a fishing tackle shop in Florida, a forgotten man. Julian Vane. His trial was swift. Faced with Blackwood's notes and Peter Holloway's accounting, his defense collapsed. He was convicted on 18 counts. His golden boy charm was gone. He tried to blame everyone. Amelia for being vindictive, Serafina for being unstable, and Blackwood for tricking him. The judge didn't buy it. He was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Thorne Applied Dynamics was dissolved, its assets seized and sold off to pay back the investors he had defrauded. He was no longer a millionaire. He was a number. Judge Marcus Donovan. He was the hardest to fall. He fought with all the old money power he could muster. But Blackwood's evidence was too precise. The trail of advice was undeniable. He wasn't convicted of taking bribes, he was too smart for that, but of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. He was forced to step down from the bench in disgrace. He was sentenced to 5 years probation, a slap on the wrist for a man of his stature, but for him, it was a life sentence. He had lost the one thing he cared about, his reputation. He retreated to his ancestral home and was never seen in public again. Serafina Reed. Her story was perhaps the most tragic. She was a material witness. On the stand, she was no longer the smug mistress. She was a broken, weeping woman. She testified that she knew nothing about the fraud. She had just been so desperate for her father's and Julian's approval that she did whatever they asked. I just wanted them to see me," she cried. The U.S. attorney declined to press charges for the conspiracy. Her assault charge, however, stood. Given her cooperation, the judge sentenced her to 2 years of probation, mandatory therapy, and 500 hours of community service at a women's shelter. The last time Amelia saw her, Serafina was in the hallway after her sentencing. She looked at Amelia, her eyes clear for the first time. I am so sorry," she whispered, for your cheek, and for everything." Amelia, holding her 3-month-old baby girl, looked at the young woman who had, in a twisted way, saved her. "I hope you find some peace, Serafina," Amelia said. And she meant it. Amelia Thorne. She was no longer Thorne. She had taken her maiden name back. Amelia Hale. She had won the divorce by default. After the government seized Julian's assets, there wasn't much left. But Elena Vance had worked her magic, securing a trust for the baby from what remained. Amelia didn't need the money. She sold the few pieces of jewelry Julian had given her, including the Cartier bangles. With the proceeds, she moved to a small, charming town in Vermont. She bought a farmhouse. She gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl, whom she named Hope. Her life was no longer about marble floors and abstract art. It was about the smell of baking bread, the sound of her daughter's laughter, and the quiet, solid truth of the grass beneath her feet. The slap, that brutal, violent act, had been a kind of awakening. It had shattered the gilded cage, and, in the most painful way possible, set her free. She had found that the most valuable thing in the world wasn't a $1.8 million watch or a $50 million settlement. It was her own quiet, unassailable integrity. She had, in the end, gotten everything. In the end, it wasn't a story about a slap. It was a story about consequences. Julian Vane thought his wealth made him untouchable. Serafina Reed thought her anger made her powerful. And Judge Donovan thought his position made him immune. They forgot one simple, ancient truth: karma. It may be slow, it may be quiet, but when it arrives, it is always, always on time. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that the truth is the one asset that can never be seized, and that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how gracefully you can stand back up. What did you think of this story? Do you believe Serafina deserved her second chance? Or was Julian the real villain of this whole story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes our community so special. If this story touched your heart or just made you gasp, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells YouTube you want to see more content just like this. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have so many more stories of justice, betrayal, and incredible karma coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one.